Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks. It's V, the Guerrilla Economist, coming to you live on this edition for V for Veles. And we have with us a man of the hour who needs no introduction whatsoever. It is the one and only Veles, the Dark Raven of the Deep State, and he is here documenting the play-by-play, forecasting the next moves. And I remember 2 years ago having a conversation with Veles privately while having dinner with him, and he told me specifically that V, private equity is not too happy with California. They want Gavin out. They want the whole thing redone. A purge will be coming. And I thought to myself, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. I wonder what they're going to do. And then lo and behold, here we are.
The Purge, and this ain't no movie.
No, it's not no movie whatsoever, man. Not no movie whatsoever. So, Veles, I don't know where you want to start. The floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you, sir. We got a lot to cover, folks, and I am directly involved right now in what's going on the West Coast, trying to help organizations with what they're doing. So I'm praying to God I don't get pulled away from the mic. We're just going to do the best we can here. So on the audio issues we ran into last week, we are aware, we're working on those. I still find it funny that at least on my shows, the things I've been most in trouble for are Miami Vice episodes and music clips. German elections. Housekeeping item. Keep in mind the German national elections are February 23rd of this year. Remember what I said about the Bundesbank and the EU Central Bank and the fact they are the same thing. Those elections are as much a mandate on the EU as Germany itself. Tons of pressure will be brought to bear. I'll throw a penny in the pond and surmise things in Ukraine, quote unquote, may begin officially wrapping up once those are over, depending on the outcome. Also, amusingly, you know what takes place on the 28th of February? All 7 of the major planets in our solar system will be visible in a row along the night sky at the same time. A planetary alignment, the number 7, the German elections. You know, now that I think of it, just stay out of Europe in February. I've got a feeling. Permanence versus transitory, both sarcasm and truth all rolled into one. I sure am glad the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights are not as transitory and open to interpretation as social media venues upon which those discussions take place. Yes, I'm referring to Mark Zuckerberg's recent statements about eliminating fact checkers on the Facebook social media site. Let's not get caught up in distracting chatter that occurred because of Donald's presidency and Zuckerberg wants to win favors. Not humor levied at unemployed U.S. intelligence folks no longer working for Facebook, much less the shrinking relevancy of that social media site compared to others. What I would point your attention to is instead, 1 minute we have freer speech on certain social media sites, then we don't, then it's back again. Speech and your rights are legally guaranteed, and the limits thereof are defined in the glorious U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights, not the mood swings of people in Silicon Valley any more than Washington, D.C. Let this be yet another reminder to please take the courses on the website How to Win in Court. That website is www. and it's all one word, howtowinincourt.com. Global sit rep, we need to begin here. The following segment on the global reset is supremely critical, folks. It's at the heart of what I've been discussing for more than a year, and it will shape everything I cover in 2025. My deep thanks to Cave Toad for the following. He also posted this article in Discord from a website called Off Guardian by a person named Kit Knightley, K-N-I-G-H TLY, titled The Big Story of 2024 That Nobody's Talking About. That website is offguardian.org, who also is very good and worth adding to your websites in your browser, and that's off-guardian.org. Hey, V, could you take a quick look at Rumble? I don't think we're broadcasting there. We are on YouTube.
Yeah, I had a technical issue there right now. I'm trying to fix that.
No worries. There's always something, folks. So the author's article was an excellent way to synthesize many things into a single view, and it helped me shape this segment. We've covered on Rogue the various goings-on which the apex elites or the top elite organizations, who's in conflict, who's in coordination with whom the last few years, and especially this last year. All global activity and events and everything else in our lives has to begin from this place. And this place is, and this isn't hyperbole, in 2025, every day of our lives is going to begin from this place. And the net of that article, deep breath, the world's elites, whether apex or not, regardless of their periodic conflicts with one another, they are still driving towards the plan. And the plan is loosely the all-encompassing phrase or reference to what we've heard about what was known as the Great Reset. And I'm dead serious. The memory hole has gone from erasing events from 5 years ago to now forgetting what occurred in our world a month ago. We have to recall all those world leaders discussing how the global pandemic was the perfect opportunity to reset the world via the Great Reset, tackle all the major global problems via new economic and social models. We saw it at the time. We heard it at the time. We tried to internalize it at the time. Even those of us in the alternative community could not entirely get our heads around it. You're listening to a piece of music, folks, where they've changed the tempo. They've changed the key in which the music is playing, but they have not changed the song. To quote Led Zeppelin, the song remains the same. To oversimplify, they've adjusted their approach. The goal is the same. They tried to do it all at once during the coup, and it didn't work. So now they're breaking it into pieces. In fact, dividing up the world into essentially zones and tackling this in each zone. When Ronald Reagan was president, or for that matter, Bill Clinton, can you imagine the reaction if either one of them said, hey, we're going to acquire Greenland and Canada, and if necessary, by military force? My God, the media would have melted down and the United Nations would have held emergency meetings. And the guy who's making those statements is already one of the most controversial U.S. presidents we've ever had, and yet the media is treating it like a low-octane story. The media talks about the U.S. making Greenland the 51st state and then move on to the weather. Are they serious about making Canada and Greenland protectorates of the United States? Returning to the article, the author's argument is the all-in approach of the Great Reset didn't work, so they're adjusting and they're breaking the world into 7 or 8 major districts. That's a bit of an oversimplification, but it is spot on. Stepping back then, all these weird global rituals going on, the fact that 3 U.S. domestic attackers, all of them not just military personnel, but had appeared on TV shows prior to those attacks. You might even say they were media personalities. The drones, the fires in California, and the list goes on. It's also my theme with all of you about how you execute something like this. I don't care how many members of the London Corporation or Davos are having caviar and skiing at meetings in the Alps. You need godlike program and project managers to pull something like this off. I've said this before. You need hundreds of those folks to manage all the pieces and the threads of plans like this. I'd give big money to know where they're located and working. I'd maybe stop by with a pizza and ask what the software products are they're using. Look at what occurred with the British Commonwealth countries. This means England, Scotland, Wales, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, among others. These draconian policies on medical care, social movement, the fact you mention foreign nationals on your soil are sexually assaulting women and children, and they send you to re-education camps. Because of the case of the latter, we're going to move labor around this big spinning blue ball any way we wish, and you're going to shut up about it. Now the Commonwealth countries are adding taxes to foods they consider unhealthy and continue to focus on 15-minute cities. But that's not just the Commonwealth, because 11 U.S. states have said you cannot purchase a gasoline-powered car by 2035, if not before. Then a laundry list of reasons globally, by the way, why there needs to be digital IDs. I love the author of the article's bullet points on the global ID justifications by country. In the case of the United States, well, we need global IDs to secure the border. Never mind putting up a fence. To protect children in Australia, to track migrant workers in Russia. And China, well, in the case of China, because we're the Chinese government, we said so. The author also uses the laser pointer analogy I referenced last week. They keep using the laser pointer to distract everyone while they build this control structure. It's like a bad rendition of the conversation from the movie My Dinner with Andre. We all need to go get a few seeds for pine trees. To reiterate what I said last week, beyond the ritual and the ceremony of many recent events, they're feeding our reactions and data into the machine to better fine-tune it to adjust the public to their long-term goals around the Great Reset. Equally, all of you in our audience need to start asking yourselves some really deep questions on this topic. What are the most critical life goals for you and those you love? Is it mobility? Is it wealth? Is it knowledge? Is it all of them? Your answers to those questions are the roadmap for your lives you need to build or adjust right now. I say that because, trust me, starting this year more than ever, you're going to be tested on those things more than ever. Candidly, if you're even aware of it at all. As they say in some parts of this country, given what's coming, you need to get right with the Lord, and real quick.
Hmm.
Speaking of ritual and ceremony, bear with me just 1 second, V.
Yeah, no problem. And also, if there's any links that you wanted to send me, I couldn't get access to my rogue email. You want to put up in the private?
No, we're good there. I wasn't going to bother with that after the last few weeks. So you'll forgive me, folks. I literally have a another laptop screen as I'm talking to all of you with like real time data on the fires in California, where I'm literally watching planes flying over locations virtually. Speaking of ritual and ceremony, recall what I said about the elites kill somebody symbolically. With women, it's drowning, and with men, it's strangulation. It may be as it appears at the same time. I'll point out that Aubrey Plaza's husband, Biana, died from hanging. Candidly, the number of Hollywood notables as B actors, writers, and similar who've left this world in the last few months is more than a trickle. Yes, there's a legitimate sounding reason for all those deaths. I'm just saying. A related item is the gentleman running the donut site who pointed out the license plate of the New Orleans attacker equals the year the Gregorian calendar was introduced. Quick history lesson.
Wow.
The Western world used to use what was known as the Julian calendar until the late 1500s, when the Gregorian was adopted. If you add the digits of his license plate number, then use what's known as gematria to convert the letters, it totals 1582. His license plate was LZ, Lima Zulu, 1575 from the state of Texas. In gematria, the letter L is the number 6 and the letter Z is the number 1. If you add 7 to 1575, you arrive at 1582. We have several people dying from a lack of air and cold in the wheel wells of airliners again, with at least 2 folks just dying this week. Is that ritual? I'm just asking for a friend. Here's another one for you, a bit of a mind scrambler. Are all the major wars in human history, at least the last 300 years, and I'm serious about this, nothing more than ritual human sacrifice? I'm serious when I say that. Last one, the movie Don't Look Up. It was officially sold as being about the denial of global warming and other environmental issues. There's a ton of symbolism in that film as well. Here's a Veles angle. What if it's an open admission to issues about the sun? Just saying. For sale sign. With all the chatter about Canada and Greenland among various seizure options for the U.S., let's be honest, this is shade being thrown. This is trolling on a grand scale. This is broadcasting about the changing nature of who's in charge and to what degree globally, and a host of other things. It's also the classic head fake by pulling people out of their stupor to say, wait, did I hear that right? We're making Greenland the 51st state? To quote the late Bill Hicks, the comedian, go back to bed, America. Your government is in charge. Go back to watching the TV show Cops. As I said earlier, the fact the media reports it like it's actual news makes me laugh. I have a vision of newsreaders before they turn on the cameras and reading what they call the copy of the material they're about to read, saying, wait, is this for real? It's not April 1st. You really want me to read that on the air? This is not a light topic in the slightest, and I'm so fond of saying I know a little bit about this. Back in the early 1990s, there was talk of Quebec, or as Matthew Ehret would say, Quebec, leaving Canada and becoming its own country. There's a huge history there, and I'll let Matthew Ehret fill you in on that one. Many Canadians feel about Quebec the way a chunk of Americans feel about California. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Behind closed doors, though, I was debriefed years later on the very real conversation between the U.S. government, the Canadian provinces of Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. This is no joke. The officials of those Canadian provinces in the West were discussing what becoming U.S. protectorates like Puerto Rico would look like, much less statehood. No one was signing any documents, but real discussions were taking place to figure out what the country-to-country merger would look like. In a word, the headaches involved in just bringing those provinces into the United States were monumentally Old Testament. Sure, people on both sides of the border knew it was equally a pressure play by the western provinces of Canada on the government of Ontario to fix the situation with Quebec immediately. The Canadian province of Manitoba at the time, who just kind of sits in the middle of the country, was just looking in both directions, asking somebody to just tell them what was going on. The net of it is from that dry run in the early 1990s to bring Greenland or Canada or pieces of Canada to the United States would be biblically hard. It would be the equivalent of Germany getting East Germany back and trying to integrate them for the next 10 years. In a word, there's no way it's happening. It's drama and potentially some closer ties between our countries, but that's about it. 2 seconds. Talk Talk about multitasking. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Noting the fact this was Orthodox Christmas on Tuesday the 7th, due to the faith follows the Julian calendar rather than the Gregorian when it comes to holidays. Let's talk about the Russian Orthodox Church. All religions or faiths have their challenges as they're human institutions who on a good day are attempting to understand the divine via fallen human beings. I'm not giving a pass to pedophiles in that group out of Rome, but I'm flexible on some of your garden variety corruption, illegitimate kids, church leaders, and similar. Some history prior to the main points of this segment. For those of you who are hardcore Orthodox believers or historians, please give me a little room as I'm shooting for a back of matchbook definition for this segment. When during the course of human events, the Roman Empire was divided administratively into the Western and Eastern empires, the Christian church was also bifurcated. The Western Church, loosely known as the Catholic Church, was based on writings in Latin and a strong hierarchical structure. The Eastern Church was based on writings in Greek and a decentralized model, where over time each ethnic group had its own Orthodox Church. That also occurred as the disciples set up churches during their various travels in different lands. Over time, Eastern Orthodoxy adopted a bit of a messianic worldview for a couple of reasons. Western Rome fell in the 470s AD and left both the political and religious legacy of Rome to Constantinople and what we know as the Byzantine Empire, an empire who fell in the 1450s, nearly 1,000 years after Rome. When Russia was still a series of city-states, including the Kievan Rus, please see the current conflict in Ukraine, its leadership wanted a state religion. They were big fans of Islam, but there's that small problem of no alcohol in Islam. And for a variety of reasons, the early city-states of Russia adopted Orthodoxy. This is also why Russian churches frequently look like a mosque from an architectural standpoint. They love that architectural style, and so they merged it with the religion. When Byzantium fell, the Messianic mission angle, along with a few other features, was strongly adopted by the Russian Orthodox Church. They would have deferred to the Greeks, of course, but Greece was occupied by the Ottoman Empire and no longer sovereign. Culturally, ethnically, and socially, Russia adopted a defender of the faith approach in the late 1400s going on. Said another way, the civilization created by Rome transitioned to Byzantium and then transitioned from Byzantium to Russia from a certain Russian point of view. Obviously, not everyone in Europe agreed with that. It's also why no matter the political landscape, the Greeks and the Russians will always have ties to one another. The Greeks view the Russians as holding their wallet until they could get it back. Fast forward to the fall of Imperial Russia in 1917, the result of which was the Russian Orthodox Church was taken over by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Any priests or officials who objected to that were either shot or sent to the gulags. For the diaspora of Russians who fled, including my own family, there was a problem. The OCA, or Orthodox Church in America, took its orders from Moscow, and communists were running it. Therefore, another division in the religion occurred yet again when the white Russian community in the U.S. established what was known as ROKOR, the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia. Bear with me just a second. It was anti-communist and closely tied to folks who fought in the Russian Civil War against the Bolsheviks. Amusingly, folks who were also connected to the founding of the American OSS and CIA, but that's another story. ROKOR also had influence in places like Alaska, Japan, and nationalist China, and now Taiwan for similar reasons of anti-communism. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, over OCA and ROKOR began speaking about unification. It's worth noting that wasn't the only discussion around reunification taking place. There were serious steps being taken to reach out to the global Russian diaspora community about coming home, or at least helping the new Russian state dig itself out of the hole it was in. ROKOR stated they would never support a reunification of the leadership of the Russian Orthodox Church without certain conditions. One of those was ROKOR always knew KGB and GRU intelligence personnel ended up as priests in the Soviet Union when they retired. What better place for them to keep an eye on the public? They wanted the OCA to officially renounce anyone in their ranks who was known to be former Soviet intelligence or police. There was also another reason why ROKOR demanded this. They knew Soviet intelligence had been heavily compromised by the Mossad. The Mossad penetration was particularly notable in the late 1980s because of the Jewish Russians who were allowed to emigrate to Israel. The Mossad was able to quickly develop vast levels of knowledge of Soviet intelligence tradecraft, as well as all the key personnel in the Soviet Union. Those would be the very people leading the country after the Soviet Union collapsed. The last thing ROKOR wanted was the Russian Orthodox Church to be leveraged as an intelligence agency by the new Russian government of the 1990s or Israel. This is where it gets a little fuzzy. The OCA sort of cleaned house, but it was glossed over where ROKOR and OCA did finally unite into a single unified church. Why? Because people like Vladimir Putin, who are big fans of the Russian Orthodox Church for nationalistic reasons, are former Soviet intelligence. The OCA had to be careful about who they showed the door. Plus, few knew of Mossad's penetration, and though people were moved to other posts or outside the OCA entirely, the Mossad's grip on the church remains to this day. I can tell you I personally know priests in the American Russian Orthodox Church who in the early 2000s fought a very specific fight. Not against Mossad penetration, but because a lot of money was being laundered through the Russian Orthodox Church in America. Several leading officials of the church, both in the United States and Russia, were forced to step down. Talk about a Slavic blood feud. It was ugly, and there are still some rumors about folks who died during those years. A priest who is a friend of mine and a very good man won the fight of this for his part in it, but he was still forced to retire after those resignations. What's the current state today? Well, it's hard to say, and I don't believe anyone is about to launch an audit. I've shared with you the reservations felt by Orthodox priests of the weaponization of the church by Vladimir Putin the last few years. Yes, I share their concern, but weaponization of religion is as old as time. Equally, there are some new angles you may see in the United States, much less globally. There's been a surge on Twitter and other social media platforms of Orthodox songs, history, artwork, and the benefits of the faith in today's confusing world. Part of that is probably because I periodically click that content, and of course the Matrix sends me more. However, that is not the sole reason. There's a growing media effort to promote orthodoxy in general in the United States, and who's pushing it and funding it is fuzzy. Russia alone is not enough of an answer, and I know folks in my community who wonder if the source is not Israel or other intelligence agencies. Given what I just told you, that actually is a good guess. None other than the Telegraph out of the UK a week ago ran a series on how American single men are more and more drawn to orthodoxy. The reason,
it's really gotten a hold, especially in the quote unquote red pill community, where you got young men who are, rejecting modern feminism and trying to find a more traditional route and whatnot. A lot of them, like one of the guys is I forgot what's his name, Andrew something, but they are all pushing orthodoxy. It's incredible, like out of nowhere. Like orthodoxy's like really picked up.
It has, and more than enough that even as a practitioner myself, it's like, wait a minute, this is way more than I'm used to seeing. And of course, one of the reasons being leveraged in the United States in particular is orthodoxy provides a masculine reinforcing safe space to be a man when everybody else seems to want you to become woke. And noting the Telegraph article, it has to be the fourth or fifth such article I've seen in a major publication in the last few months, both on the benefits of orthodoxy and the appeal to American men and Americans specifically. With all the talk of the United States picking up Greenland and Canada in bankruptcy court, there's another widespread theme in cyberspace. The ongoing mantra about make Istanbul Constantinople again, or other themes like Constantinople belongs to Greece, let's help them invade. If you're outside of this community, this may seem almost like comedy. I assure you it's deadly serious. It reminds me of the particularly germane bit of Babylon 5 dialogue who goes something along the lines of, a religious zealot propelled by prophecy into a position of military and political power is always a bad idea, unquote. A couple of global media outlets have been occasionally writing articles about this topic, and certainly no one in the United States is paying attention. I mean, religion is so yesterday. One of the things those global media organizations have pointed out is the fact the Russian Orthodox Patriarch recently stopped wearing his $30,000 watch as it didn't look good when he's speaking about charity. Equally, should Orthodoxy continue to spread, that means church banking and other resources will expand with it. Even I've been surprised to see a number of new Orthodox churches being built globally, not just in the United States, but also in South America and Asia. At the same time, for the Russian American community, there is talk of, you bet, that we need to fire up ROKOR again. This time not to oppose communist influence in our beloved faith, but to make sure Israel's not turning it into their pawn. Deeply ideological, dovetailing off that segment about the Russian Orthodox Church, a philosophical item. A year or two ago, I walked you through the accepted schools of thought on global history and the analysis of the international environment. loosely said, the world, its past, and its present. Then I walked you through schools of thought in the alternative community and how they differ from the accepted academic approaches or schools of thought. Central to the global view of many of us at Rogue News is an apex elite environment led by the London Corporation and the other group in Davos, Switzerland, a view where most global governments are beholden to one of those two or another elite group. Further, the London Corporation most probably is the inheritor of power and global view of the elites of Western Rome. Said more bluntly, the London Corporation is a literal creation of the Western Roman Empire. Also central to that model are forms of imperial government globally, not just in politics, but in global financial markets, commodities, corporate models, and similar. Now that we have clarity on those baselines, I strongly believe there's another shift taking place, and it's ideological. What do I mean? In prior programs, I expressed my view that everything from Donald Trump's presidency to other political shifts are part of a new power model. Keep in mind what I said about the plan, though. The London Corporation and Davos are still key apex elites, but London has been brought down a few notches from what it was. There's another shift, I believe, who's occurring. To be transparent, several other analysts have weighed in on this. Notably, what I found interesting about that was each of the analysts who were commenting about what I'm about to say are not even aware of one another's work, so I believe this is organic. What all those folks are talking about, and I concur, is a shift away from modes of imperial structures. Does that mean an across-the-board abandonment of that model? Hard to say, and elements of it will remain. I mean, it's not like De Beers is going to cough up their monopoly on diamonds. That said, consider the following for a moment. France is literally pulling back from Africa in an imperial sense. In the last 2 months, I've probably seen more articles in the mainstream media about the reality of French power in Africa than I've seen in the previous 30 years. To be even more blunt, the mainstream media is saying things about the French relationship with Africa the last 2 months that are on par with what Rogue News has been saying for 4 years. Namely, France earns billions of dollars out of Africa from natural resources while those countries suffer. That model is quickly and radically changing. Does it mean France is completely out in those countries' economics as well? No, but it's still a tectonic shift nonetheless. We have mainstream discussions of the possibility of Western banking systems will coexist with BRICS rather than one replacing the other. That's also less than a global imperial structure. Then we have this rather odd series of comments by Donald Trump about Greenland and Canada. Some people laugh at that, and the mainstream media acts, keyword, acts like it's all crazy. However, consider that scenario in its ultimate form. What if countries acted like self-interested actors and decided, you know what, being part of the British Commonwealth just doesn't work for us anymore, so we're going to become a protectorate of Bolivia? Sure, it sounds crazy, but if corporations can do it with mergers and acquisitions, why can't countries? Consider the possibilities. Then the small matter of the fact Canada is part of the British Commonwealth and Greenland is one of Denmark's last assets outside of its borders. What's next? The United States picks up French Guiana or Australia? We have been living, and this is very important, we have been living in forms of imperial structures and systems for so long in our lives, folks, we have forgotten or aren't even aware of the degree to which we're living under those systems. Imperial systems are all we've ever known, so we have no other reference point. It's like I said when the Soviet Union collapsed. The Eastern European countries still had like constitutions or other documents of government left over before the Soviet Union took them over and kind of occupied them. So they could go back and say, well, you know, in 1920, at least in the 30s, this was our form of government. Let's try and fire that up again and see how it goes. But in the case of the Soviet Union, it had been more than 100 years. And so it was much harder for Russia to develop a new governmental system because they'd never really had one that wasn't anything but authoritarian. So to paraphrase from the movie The Matrix is part of every aspect of your life and you don't even know you're living in it. Well, that's a literal interpretation of our lives the last 300 years. To someone like me, the United States is technically not a country. I mean that in a literal academic and political science sense. The United States is a global corporation made up of 50 divisions. We are an antithesis to how the rest of this planet has been running for more than 300 years. And I go back to the importance of the U.S. Constitution. That's why so many powerful people in Europe for hundreds of years have hated the United States. And I mean hated, because it introduced a new model they didn't want anybody else thinking about. And of course, as I once said in an academic paper, the United States, since its founding, is a reaction to British power and the East India Company. This is what is so fundamental about the U.S. war between the states or civil war. The whole point of the thing was if certain states felt this arrangement wasn't working for them, they could leave. Instead, what happened was military and political violence was used to drag the South back in here. Said another way, America acted exactly like Britain's treatment of its colonies in the North's reactions to the South. We proved we are an imperial power. Many analysts have also said following World War II, the United States became an imperial power. Let me rephrase that. We became no less than the imperial authority of this planet. Factually, we are doing so on behalf of the British, but that's window dressing and you understand what I'm saying. This is another reason why you see the future administration going after certain British leaders right now, specifically Elon Musk's attacks on certain British leaders. To conclude on this topic, it's one thing to realize and say it appears a significant shift occurred among the world's apex elites during the last 2 years. It's a sea change of biblical proportions to say global imperial models are going to be adjusted or downright abandoned. The only other thing we must understand is if this new world is still run by eugenicists trying to lock us in 15-minute cities. So now the biggie, California's fires. We could have a whole show on the fires, folks, but we don't have that kind of time, and I've tried to pluck the high points in the following. So the following are a number of takeaways about the fires in California, and so let's start here. On Monday the 7th, and throughout the rest of the week, there was roughly 5 to 6 major fires around Los Angeles, and not just the one in the Palisades that you often see on the news. As I mentioned on Quite Frankly last night, if you total up all the small fires, big fires, and some fires have been put out, Southern California just this week has had 92 fires. The Palisades got all the attention due to its proximity to Los Angeles city center and because those are wealthy neighborhoods. It's worth noting the Palisades fire extends from the western edge of the city around Santa Monica through the Palisade Mountains to Malibu. How big is that? Well, it's 19,970 acres because I've been monitoring it live all this week because of the work I do. By the way, Manhattan in land area is 14,600 acres. So an area the size larger than Manhattan has just burned. Most of you in the audience have picked up from other shows. I've been working in California the last few years. And yes, I'm going to be on the ground next week, which is why I will not have a show. At the end of this segment, I'm going to share with you the reason why I've been out there. There's a ton of moving pieces to this fire story. Equally, social media and the traditional media are doing everything they can to distract you. When you see the Los Angeles mayor getting jumped by reporters at the airport, that's not a normal day, my friends. They have bodyguards to prevent that. That was a setup, pure and simple, and I'm literally of the belief powerful people told the mayor of Los Angeles, look, this is going to happen when you land after your trip to Ghana, and you're going to let it happen, or else. Gavin Newsom just yesterday was confronted on film by a homeowner, and the fear in his eyes certainly seemed real.
He was trying to call the president.
Right. Well, I'm on the phone with Joe Biden right now, honey. If you could just kind of, hey, Bob, where are you? Bob, this woman looks dangerous.
He was absolutely gobsmacked. He was panic stricken. It was incredible.
Yeah, that was not, I didn't order this. That was that was something else. What happens, oh mighty Caesar, when the Praetorian bodyguards are nowhere to be found?
Yeah.
I would also remind you Karen Bass, the LA mayor, was once part of a Marxist group who used to travel to Cuba. I'm not saying that yeah. I'm not saying that in the sense of she's no good for America. I'm saying that in the same vein as actor James Woods and others saying voters in Los Angeles chose her over a billionaire business person in the form of Rick Caruso, who's now going off in the media every day about how bad she is. In the Veles world, though, both she and Rick are in the media spotlight by design. Note my prior comments. Let us discuss some facts and equally try and keep the intentionally created emotion, keyword, from the press out of this, because I know a lot of folks have very strong feelings on both sides about the fires, about the state of California, about the people living there, blah, 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 blah. I get it. I'm trying to give you reality. So the first item is Los Angeles County has 10 million residents in that large county in Southern California. And 10 million residents is more than the entire state populations of most Western states. Equally, that area of SoCal, as they call it, includes other major towns and cities. So as a result, basically everything north of the city of Irvine and south of the city of Santa Clarita compromises Los Angeles. That's about 40 to 50 miles of real estate with 10 million people packed into it. When things go wrong with that level of density, they go wrong real quick and on a large scale. Second item. Yes, Los Angeles reduced the budget for the city fire department, and this was on top of many resignations by fire and EMS personnel over the COOF shot mandates. And as some of you may have seen in this morning's press, it now turns out that just before the fires broke out, Mayor Bass was trying to cut another $40 million out of the fire budget.
Wow.
However, yeah. Now, at the same time, folks, I work with emergency personnel in California, and the following is also true. California has a very well-developed resource sharing agreements among metro areas. If one area is overtaxed, they can request resources from nearby areas quickly, and I've seen it in action firsthand, and it does work very well. This does not excuse in the slightest the budget cuts or the shot mandate effects. I'm simply noting all the elements of staff and budget. And of course, it's been said by many, perhaps now would be a good time to just let bygones be bygones and let anybody who still is not been hired back, hire them back over the damn shot. Third, the water situation is complicated, and you're hearing some things who are true, but not necessarily relate to this situation. Loosely said, the Palisades fire was difficult enough, and as you've heard, the 3 primary water sources were exhausted quickly by firefighters. Factor in the winds and the grounding of the aircraft dropping water or fire retardant, and the fire hammered that area hard. This is where a theme I've raised before will again about U.S. states or the government when they expect everything to be listed in the manual, rather than empowering smart people to make the right decision. When you have fires like this, the prudent thing to do is shut down the power in areas where the fire is present to prevent further risk of additional fires starting. This helps prevent lines from dropping and starting new fires, or surges in the power grid, which is a whole other problem. However, shutting off that power needs to be done carefully, or you might shut off electric pumps you need. It appears in part that's what occurred in the Palisades. As the 3 main water sources were drawn down, the tanks were not refilled as fast as needed. Part of that is you're pumping water up those mountains to those tanks, and the other part is you may lose electric pumps to support that activity. Ergo, you need empowered folks to make the decision. You can cut the power to X areas, but keep the lines live over here where the pumps are located. Being from the Midwest, I'm a big fan of diesel-powered anything. This is purely my own opinion, and I have nothing to back it up at present, but my gut says there's no way, given California environmental laws, they would use diesel pumps up there and would instead use electric. And quite frankly, in my book, because of the torque abilities of a diesel engine, if you're trying to pump heavy liquid like water up a mountain, you want a diesel pump. Then there's the question raised about why trucks with large water tanks were not headed up those mountains as soon as the LA Fire Department was up there, precisely for something like that had occurred. To be fair, everyone loves to armchair quarterback events like this. It's not my intention, but it's a fair question, especially when you consider it's not like California does not know how to fight fires the way Florida knows how to manage hurricanes. Equally, and I've seen it firsthand in my work, you have a ton of fires who pop up quickly. It's never as clear-cut as sending the trucks to the fire you see at the moment. A location far more prone where fire may spread may catch fire, and now your resources are in the wrong area. Should water trucks and similar been pre-positioned, like FEMA often does when it comes to hurricanes or other disaster preparation, it would have helped. There are misunderstandings about the stories you hear of California has all this water and they're directing it to the Pacific Ocean. To review from a prior program, California has policies in place during the winter who were made for good reason. If it rains in the summer, water is directed to various lakes and aquifers. In the winter, though, the water is directed to the Pacific Ocean. Why? Because if California is having a warm winter, all that water melting in the mountains can flow beyond the aquifers and flood cities and towns. As a preventative measure, they direct it to the ocean. So again, it's that thing about letting officials make the right decision when warranted. Various California officials have the authority to make the decision to close those gates and direct the water to the aquifers. This is exactly what occurred in early 2024 when the rainwater was directed into the ocean because that was policy. California didn't direct it where it was needed early last year because, not to be snarky, it required making a decision and no one wanted to get in trouble for exercising their authority without 30 other people agreeing with them. However, what's the truth? Well, in 2024, California was lucky because the rains later in the year were sufficient to replace the water in the near empty aquifers. So when you hear comments about California's aquifers and a lack of water, that's not really the issue for that specific fire. It's the tanks running dry up in the Palisades, at least for where that fire began. The fourth item is the Santa Ana winds and microclimates. These regularly occur in California. Natives have lived with them for years. Those of us from the Midwest would need to imagine a wall of tornadoes coming through your town because that's what these winds can be like. Or for that matter, the Habu in Arizona, or for those of you who traveled through the Middle East and have seen one of those. It's a known environmental event in California, not as the media has portrayed it. The same is true with California's microclimates, where when I was in San Jose, it can be 95 degrees, and if you travel 30 miles to the coast in Monterey, it's 60 degrees with wind. So what changed this time in Los Angeles? The winds were on the higher end of intensity to begin with, and it hit certain areas hard. Also, due to the microclimate behavior in California, the winds do not always behave the way you might normally think. At times during these fires, the winds were blowing from the east, not the west. That's why when you look at certain satellite photos, you'll see smoke heading out over the Pacific. If you were to light a fire in your backyard, imagine taking a leaf blower to it. Same concept here. Not to go there, but regardless of how fires started, there was also the matter of the strong winds and the fuel. The other angle is those winds also create tough conditions for pilots to drop water on the fires. As I said earlier, they had to ground those planes at one of the most critical periods of time. It's like a line from the old World War II movies where someone says, without air support, we're going to have to stop those German tanks with infantry, because that's exactly what happened. And infantry with no bullets in the form of water. Fifth, California weather impact on plant and tree growth. California goes through these surges of good weather and crazy weather, and then drought, and then everything dies, and then good weather again, and then things grow. It's a desert. That's what deserts do. If you've ever been out in Arizona, and I have on many occasions, right after a rain, within a day, you'll see green ground cover everywhere. And within 2 or 3 days, it's tumbleweeds rolling through the street. So it also means you're tailor-made for plenty of fuel for fires if ones begin. Equally, if conditions are not crazy dry once the Santa Ana winds get blowing, they will be. The sixth item is maintenance of the land to prevent the dried material from feeding the fires. You've heard me mention in Northern California, or NorCal, for many years, ground around power lines was very well maintained. What does that mean? Well, it means trees were periodically thinned out so you didn't have too much density should fires occur, and importantly, ground brush was cleared out. To oversimplify, if you have too much dried material on the ground in the form of bushes and growth who are dead, you just have intense kindling. Once that goes up, and with trees too tightly packed, you'll be able to see the fire from space in no time. NorCal for years was one of the world's best managed regions when it came to that, and as a result, you had no issues with the power grid up there from a fire. That's radically changed. The reasons why it occurred throughout California are many, but the former excellent management of wooded areas has stopped. As a result, when fires break out, they get out of control quickly and take out the power grid. Equally, if the power grid is overstressed, and it is often, they cut back on power to prevent a line from catching fire from such immense use and starting a fire when it hits the ground. Obviously, the solution is to return to better land management, but I don't think that's going to happen. The same thing has occurred in the South. The seventh item is the impact of wealth on California in events like this. To the west of the city of Los Angeles is Hollywood and Bel Air, among other wealthy communities. And when I say wealth, I'm talking at times about Silicon Valley-like money. Why does this matter? Well, it matters greatly, and the media will never talk about it. That's why I'm saying it. People with that kind of money have both the means and the influence. Said more bluntly, they say in Los Angeles it would take a lot for the campus of UCLA to catch fire. It's not impossible, but it's improbable. Why do I say that? Well, because Bel Air runs along part of the campus, and in years past when there were fires, the people living in Bel Air were on the phone to the governor, reminding them who put them into office in the first place. I'm dead serious. Those folks also have their own private services to protect their properties during events like this. You may have seen some news articles on the back page talking about arguments that occurred this last week between private firms trying to protect people's properties and local municipal resources like fire during the response. How much of a role did it play in potentially aggravating the fire response? It's hard to say, but it is a factor. The eighth item, yes, I believe the cancellation of people's home insurance is highly suspicious so close to these fires. Have insurance companies done things like that in California before? Oh, yeah. I've talked with you all a couple of times about the time they just suddenly canceled all new car insurance for Californians back in the early 90s. Current cost estimates, who of course are expected to rise, say these fires already are going to cost tens of billions of dollars. Can high net worth people rebuild their homes without insurance? Sure, but that begs the question, do you want to? We will see. Ninth, I don't care what anybody's lifestyle orientation is. I'm from the Midwest. I care about results, actions, timing, and cost. If you can perform well, okay, with some allowances, you can wear a Halloween costume every day of the week at work. Don't pay attention to criticisms of leaders during this situation because of ethnic background or orientation. Focus on their actions, decisions, and outcomes. The rest is a psyop by the man to discount your criticism because you opened the topic by first pointing out they were a DEI hire. The 10th item is these fires in the areas surrounding one of the largest American metro areas are having an impact the media is not telling you about. The fires have destroyed so many homes in the area, it's having direct impact on organizations when it comes to their staff. This includes companies, fire, police, schools, universities, and the list goes on. They've lost their homes, and it's not like they're going to buy another house. I have direct knowledge of organizations in LA who right now are trying to understand how many of their employees have been affected and may not be able to come into work. For organizations in Los Angeles right now, this is a very serious problem, and it's growing. Never mind the whole insurance thing. The saying in SoCal for years has been, you drive till you can afford it, meaning if you have an office job in Los Angeles, you basically drive away from the city until you find a metro area you can afford to live in. There isn't exactly a surplus of living space out there, and especially in a situation like this. It's going to take a lot of time to get this worked out. The 11th item is the costs of this will not just be in the billions. You have infrastructure to repair, costs and time consumed in investigations. And folks, you better believe there are lawyers right now warming up class action lawsuits against a ton of defendants. The 12th item, behind the scenes, many important things are going on as well. Some of you may have seen stories about how the Resnick family and their farming empire was able to corner the market on water in California. Here's a reference source you probably never thought you would hear me use. It was none other than the Mother Jones magazine in articles about the Resnicks, who said their farms produce more water than all of Los Angeles. Did they prevent water usage for this fire and intensify its effects? There's nothing at present that appears to indicate that. However, this is a much bigger issue, and it underlies the issue of water in California, and especially in Northern California, because the Resnick family does control the water up there. And when fires break out behind closed doors, you'll hear a lot of arguing about, wait a minute, why is water for fires being redirected to these farms? The Resnicks are also connected to the Aspen Institute and leaders in Ukraine and Israel. Then we have all the weirdness around the aerial tankers being used to fight these fires from Coulson Aviation. It's a rather deep rabbit hole about how that firm has connections to Mark Carney, who was the governor of the Bank of Canada from 2008 to 2013, and then the Bank of England from 2013 to 2020. Yes, that Bank of England, the one legally owned by the London Corporation since the 1500s. We don't have time to get into all of that, unfortunately. Do I think the planes to fight the fires didn't operate the way they should? No, I've seen nothing so far that indicates that. And like I've said, I have access to websites that are allowing me to watch in real time how those planes are fighting those fires. What I am saying is these fires bring to light, no pun intended, a company who wins huge U.S. and Canadian government contracts via relationships by its leaders to the guy who used to run the Bank of England. Under those circumstances, you have my undivided attention. You have my attention until someone can prove to me these folks are not involved in the goings-on of California for nothing more than business. I say that in reference to the Great Reset. To wrap this up, these fires occurred during deeply significant astrological and symbolic timing. Events who may, quote-unquote, have something to do with the timing of the fires beyond Mother Nature. We have unusual moon phases, the beginning of the new year. The Julian calendar Christmas was the day the fires began on the 7th. We have a 160,000-year cycle comet who has returned and is as bright as Venus at the same time. And we have a 4-planet conjunction. I mean, after all that, let's have a major fire in one of America's largest cities while we're at it. From where I sit, the Los Angeles fires are another ground zero event relating to the Great Reset. No, DARPA didn't create the Santa Ana winds, but plenty of other aspects of this could have been manipulated to intensify the situation and the outcomes. The giveaway, the clue, if our suspicions are correct, is this. It's the sole thing we need to be looking for in the news or future government leader statements. You need to look for public or subtle statements being made about how the rebuilding of these areas will be integrated as part of 15-minute city-like goals for the 2028 Olympics planned for Los Angeles. I also say that because of talk of making LA a 15-minute city in support of the 2028 Olympics, because statements like that already occurred before the fires started. The last comment is, so why have I been on the ground in California the last 3 years? Well, because as your humble host, I'm helping California plan for the Olympics. It's why I'm there. I yield the floor, V.
Very well said, fellows. Great show as always. And one of the things I want to ask you is, are you hearing any whispers on your end with private equity? Because I'll tell you right now, in terms of the regulations that are in place within the Pacific Coast Highway and all the surrounding areas that have been absolutely devastated and wiped off the face of the map, if anybody thinks that they're going to rebuild anything there, any person who had their house burned down, their mansion burned down, their businesses burned down, think you're going to rebuild, you have another reality waiting for you. And that is the red tape and all the permitting in terms of issuing permits is next to impossible. A lot of people are going to wind up hitting that wall of frustration, and it will probably be 3 to 5 years before they can even lay a piece of lay a piece of plywood down on the ground, because that's how bad it is. Which brings to the other side, something that you and I talked about over dinner. If private equity, and I think this is what's happened, if this event plays perfectly, number one, into private equity's hands, okay, number one. Number two, it works wonderful for the psychological operations of exposing these liberal nut jobs in terms of their policies, in terms of how they conduct business, in terms of how they run a state. It shows the entire country that these people are absolutely incompetent and living in some sort of delusional world, right?
Right.
So I can see that, number one, it exposes what Democrat rule looks like to the rest of the country. Number two, I don't think there's any sort of real rebuilding is going to occur. And number three, I expect private equity. You could expect BlackRock and all these other guys and all these investment firms to come in, and we could possibly see the Pacific Coast Highway being populated not by redone and remodeled houses from the 60s and 70s, but luxury high rises, condos, townhouses, multi-billion dollar build outs that are going to occur over there. That's what I see as a foresee future for California. And this also is going to possibly move California into flipping it red. What do you think, fellas?
I agree. A couple of things, and for those of you in the comment section, yes, there wasn't enough data for me to give you anything substantive, so that's why I didn't bring it up. The degree to which arson played a role here is not yet determined, and if it is determined, and even if they don't say it publicly, not to be indelicate, I'm probably going to find out about it, so I'll share it with you then. To your point, V, I hate to say something so inane, but it's the old thing about follow the money. And when you look at Private Equity Hub, which is expensive, I mean, it's majorly expensive, folks, to actually read those articles. So I just read the summaries because I'm not paying that kind of money to read their data. But when you look in general, especially when Private Equity Hub every quarter does this thing about, okay, where's money going? The first thing that leapt off the page to me, V, earlier this year was geography. Because you're absolutely right. That money is not, follow the money. That money is not flowing into California. There's money flowing out of California. And it's overly simplistic of me to say it. And I'm going to go with an old Veles standby. Say it with me, folks. 20 major billionaires earlier this year moved out of California to Camarillo, Wyoming, and took $65 billion with them. Now, V has dealings with high net worth people. I have dealings with high net worth people. And most, air quotes, most high net worth people that I deal with either have their own private equity organization, because there's a lot of reasons why they do that beyond just investing, or they have a family office who does basically the same damn thing. And so and I'm going to dovetail this into something else. I've got a very close friend of mine right now who's dealing with a horrific situation at a major investment firm where the company is making unbelievable decisions about, you have to work 5 times as hard to make the same amount of money that you did last year. And if you don't like it, there's the door. And my comment was they're flushing all of you out of there. They're just going for the numbers. They're just going for the books. And it's the same thing about what's happening in California. And the other comment I made to them was, as I said, you have very sadistic people in your company right now. And I said, I'm telling you this. They're watching to see who leaves early. Because anybody who leaves early in their book is smart. And they're going to keep an eye on you and bring you back when the time is right. But I said, I saw this at GE when certain divisions of GE were going under. And the attitude by certain senior leaders was, man, if you're still working here, you're a moron. I don't know how we ever hired you in the first place. And it's like, what? And it's like, we are obviously blowing this company up to liquidate it. Why would you still? But it's like, yeah, but you see, you're a director and a VP. You think, say it with me, you think differently than just a person who wants to hold a job and go home. I'm not trying to take over the world the way you are. So I don't, view what's what I'm looking for, the commodity-like nature of human beings. So to V's question, big money has been leaving California for some time, and big money that is specific to certain things. Now, is Silicon Valley money still there? Well, of course it is, because they run the state. But even they, at some point, are going to reach a juncture where they don't have enough people to keep their stuff running, and changes will have to be made. Now, as the old saying goes, it's very interesting to see that even in a state like California, they can pass that proposition overnight that said, okay, you can't steal anything under $950 per day anymore. And you've got all these videos on YouTube of people with their hands behind their backs in the back of police cruisers going, oh, the law says I can. It's like, not as of 12:01 today. Your ass is going to jail, And the other thing was this thing last summer where I pointed out to all of you and I said, oh, look who's sitting outside a homeless camp with a shovel. It's Gavin Newsom, because they passed an ordinance saying you can't in camp in California anymore. And I said, they did it in the name of what was going on the university campuses, but the reality was they had to start cleaning up the state. That's why they did it. And the other problem, which has been raised, which is some of these fires have been caused by large numbers of homeless people that are just trying to stay warm, and so they're lighting fires. The ground is dry, things get out of control, yada, yada, yada. So if California needs to pass a rule or a law or make a decision, they can. But like I said, they've got to get permission from the people who run that state. And so to your point, V, for years, the old rule in real estate was, in the words of a guy I knew from Canada, beach and water. If you've got, and that, I hate to say that, but it's like there are some cities out in this neck of the woods where you and I live that have been struggling for years because we don't have beach and water. We've got sunshine, we've got pretty stuff to look at, but we don't have beach and water. And so America for years has tolerated really stupid decisions on both of our coasts because of beach and water. And California, I mean, I told Frank last night, I'm not laughing when I talk about what's going on in California because I think it's funny. It is biblically horrific. This is just kind of gallows humor on my part, that it's like California has finally reached the mathematical point in the formula where this is it. It's like beach and water isn't going to save you this time. And people will say, well, government officials, look, Gavin Newsom and the mayor of LA take their orders like everybody else. And the bigger thing is, it's not just, oh, well, you may not be in office anymore. Both of them have recently been confronted by people that are fairly angry, and they're looking around going, where are my bodyguards? Oh, my God. Oh, my God, the Praetorian Guard's going to let me die. They promised me last night at dinner that I was going to be left alive. I was told I had a seat on one of the lifeboats on the Titanic. Oh, my God. Yeah, you feel that, Gavin? That's reality.
I think he's done. I think he's finished. I think it's political correct.
Yes. Yeah. And folks, by the way, taking a very rogue news kind of way of looking at that, we've talked for the longest time that Gavin and those around him and those backing him are trying to maneuver him. They're trying to position him. Will he or won't he run against Kamala? Blah, 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 blah. And this is a perfect example, and I mean that. This is a perfect example of how fast even a public elite, which is very importantly different than the real elites behind the scenes,
and not only and a Getty boy at that, which is Newsom.
Right. And so it's my comment about George Soros gets paid a lot of money and allowed to do a lot of things because the guy running him, Lord Malik Brown, knows if somebody's going to try and take somebody out, they're going to take Soros out because few people know Brown is even there. It's the same thing with Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom's out in front. He's the hood ornament. Everybody sees him. Nobody really sees who's behind the scenes with him. But it's like, this, god dang, this is exactly what I'm talking about, folks. This is how fast your ass can be on a street corner looking for work if the elite are like, you know what, you're done. Well, I was promised. Yeah. Well, to quote Lenin, promises are like breadcrumbs and meant to be broken. You're done. So yeah, I think private equity is going to continue to, I mean, beyond the whole global reset and the evil behind that, but the net of it is, and it goes to what we've been talking about a lot, V. Look geographically where all this micronuclear reactor research and other work is taking place. You look at those states, those areas, that's where private equity money has been going, not just solely in nuclear, folks, but where that nuclear activity has been taking place. I shared with all of you my experiences of going by, directly myself on the ground through Montana and Wyoming, and seeing how much growth there is in, yes, I'll say it, in former Californians, but also people from other states like Colorado or even New York that have bought up land, built homes, are starting businesses out there, etc. Anytime that happens, that means power, infrastructure, water, police, people to bring me my groceries, et cetera, et cetera. I told you all about northern Michigan, where the ski hills that used to be up there for years and still are, but in northern Michigan, right before you reach the Upper Peninsula, there's millionaires and billionaires that all moved in there in the past 5 years. I've been up there, and I went up there as a kid to go ski. It was very primitive up there. If you go up there now, it's like, oh, we have 3 small new municipal airports. We've got a ton of private jets. Would you like us to wash your jet? Or did you just want the Mercedes to have an oil change? I mean, it's like, god damn, I just drove through Detroit. It looks like Beirut in 82. And I come up to northern Michigan and it's like, la, the heavens have parted and the angels are singing. But who is in northern Michigan? Private equity.
Private equity. Exactly.
So that's
same
my
in
thought.
Wyoming. Yeah. Same in Wyoming. And it's pretty interesting. I know Virginia was getting a micronuclear reactor. Anybody else? Any other states that are on that list that you know of off the top of your head?
There's a bunch. And we have to distinguish between we're setting up a micronuclear reactor for research and as a test bed versus, hey, we're going to actually start pumping them into the power grid. Virginia, obviously, and we've covered this on Rogue, folks, is because of the immense power draw of all those data centers that are used by the government and commercial firms. Right. So they need them for sure. But an old stalwart in the nuclear space, I say that with kind of tongue in cheek, because of Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Tennessee has a lot of investment going into that state. It's a tragedy that none of it is going into Memphis, but it's all going into Knoxville and Nashville, and Nashville in spades. I mean, Nashville, my God, is becoming like LA. It is so spread out now. It's so huge. There is work in Pennsylvania. There is some work.
Anything in the Midwest or the tri-state region, let's say Northeast, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts.
There's a small one in New York, a research, somebody was setting up something up there. Out here where you and I are living, Columbus, Ohio, but we all know who runs that state and who runs that town. There's some work going on there. I'll tell you right now, given the amount of there's rumors also, as I know, whether or not Intel still exists as a company in the next 12 months, we'll see, or more accurately would get, merged with somebody. But there are all new, for all the work that Intel was talking about, the billions of dollars they were spending in Columbus, Ohio, now there's new talk of other firms that may be coming in saying, well, if they don't want that building, we'll take it. But the minute you say that, it's like, and we're going to need some power, to back that up. And it's like, well, aren't you in luck? We have a series of micronuclear research facilities that are being set up just right outside where the plant is. Oh, what are the odds? Dr. Evil. But yeah, it's to conclude on California, it is a triple play of massive infrastructure damage, an immovable bureaucracy that is just going to have to be cut like a Phrygian knot with and I've been on the ground to see it happen, folks. Even when someone is making the right decision, even when, and I use this term loosely, every political thread you can think of is saying, well, at least on this topic, we're willing to go along with what you're suggesting. California being California, there is always some highly virulent, angry, enraged group standing there with their bullhorns and their hands out saying no. Because the minute you do that, you're going to inflame the rights of or this protected group or whatever it might be. Sure. And that's always the problem, and then the unions that California's going to have to fight. So to your point, V, whether private equity is involved in rebuilding those areas or not, or the bureaucracy or not, but then the other thing is what we've talked about. You know, I've spoken to Californians in leadership roles and if on a street corner with my hand up like a football coach making sure somebody's not reading the play and told them, you do understand your state in the past 5 years has lost like 2 or 3 million people. And unfortunately, you're losing billionaires and you're going to feel that. Well, no, we haven't. It's like, well, here's this article, here's this article. Well, those are highly conservative. It's like, fine. Here is the British press, certainly not the paragon of conservative thinking, unless it's the Daily Mail. Here's the French press. I mean, in France, that you've only got left or more left as far as the press is concerned. You know, and they're looking at me going, did they get that from Fox News? No. Okay, fine. Japan, the most vanilla country on planet, their press is saying you're losing tons of people. And just the horror, the shock, and I don't mean this in a funny way, folks. I mean this as a human being talking about other human beings. The look in people's eyes when I show them, Californians, when I show them the data, is like Gavin Newsom's reaction when that woman came after him yesterday. It's like, wait a minute, you mean the universe is actually riding on the back of a giant turtle through the galaxy? Yes.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
Well, then everything I believe in is wrong. You may want to sit down. Fortunately, this is California. We have benches everywhere. Please, here, have a seat. I'll hold your hand while you get you through this. Again, I'm not making light, but it's like, again, folks, it's a perfect storm out there right now of trying to rebuild from this damage. Do you have the resources to rebuild from the damage? Do you have the money to rebuild from the damage? You're losing revenue, and you're still trying to pump out these campaigns based on ideology rather than reality. So, which, as I've often said, is by design. That's the sad thing. Yeah. You know, California, I again, you know, the warning I would give to people that are like, let that damn state fall into the ocean. And even if you believe that, and this is a free country, and I'll defend your right to believe that because we have the First Amendment. However, that's $3 trillion of this country's GDP. Well, they're all nuts. Let me repeat what I just said. That's $3 trillion of this country's GDP. It's dropping slightly because they're losing people and companies, and 220 billion of Chevron just left the state. But it's like that's still $3 trillion of this country's economy, and it is still an engine of creativity. It is still an engine of new ideas. The university labs in that state, from top to bottom, create so much new innovation in our country. Yes, right. They're in a hellscape of a conflict zone, but as I've often said on this show, we had a balance in this country even in spite of the war protests in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s in California between the left and the right. There was a balance. Things were kept in balance. The balance has gone completely out the window, and if that state suffers, the United States suffers. So, as I said, we've got to get right with the Lord quick. And I don't, you know, I'm sure a number of people are going to be a lot more open to having a conversation about things like, well, we need the government's help. Really? Well, what do you have in the way of collateral that isn't on fire right now? Anyway, so I'm hoping to be back in 2 weeks, folks, on the 24th, and we'll pick this up then, and we'll see what Veles sees on the ground. I wish you all well, as always. Take care. And for all of you living in the Midwest or other parts of this country who receive snow, would you please remember the age-old rule that we were told by our parents growing up? Please take the snow off the top of your vehicle as well as off your windows. V and I are tired of giant sheets of ice flying off your car that hit us while we're on the road.
Exactly. Oh my God. Veles, thank you so much for joining us, man. Really appreciate your time. And folks, go back and listen to this program yet again. And with that being said, we're over and out. Take care, everybody. Cheers.